I'm making this video to talk about the most regretful and shameful thing that I've ever had to talk about publicly. It's a video that's made of clips taken out of context of me of 12 years of conversations on my podcast, and it's all smushed together and it looks fucking horrible.
Okay, Nate, we just did the whole Will Smith apology video to Chris Rock. And one of the big gripes that I had, and Spidey of Behavioral Arts had, was the pre-production. And you and I talked about it. Now, this is another apology, and I think it's done in a really good manner, very straightforward. But let's just go and look.
Hello, friends. I'm making this video to talk about the most regretful and shameful thing that I've ever had to talk about publicly. There's a video that's out that's a compilation of me saying the N-word. It's a video that's made of clips taken out of context of me of 12 years of conversations on my podcast, and it's all smushed together and it looks fucking horrible, even to me. Now, I know that to most people, there's no context where a white person is ever allowed to say that word, never mind publicly on a podcast. And I agree with that now. I haven't said it in years, but for a long time, when I would bring that word up, like if it would come up in conversation, instead of saying the N-word, I would just say the word. I thought as long as it was in context, people would understand what I was doing. Like that context was part of the clip we were talking about Red Fox, how Red Fox said that word on television in the 1970s, and how times have changed so much since then. Or about how Richard Pryor used it as one of the titles of one of his albums.
Two things. If we're comparing this to the Will Smith one, this is totally night and day, right? The production value is a guy puts a camera on and says, "Hey, I'm just going to talk to the fans and let them know exactly how I feel." So, you know, it's more authentic. Like watching Joe, I feel no deception. I feel like he's being 100% honest, and I agree with everything he's saying. Like, you know, the word used in context and the rules of the game have changed. I do think but where I took points off for Will Smith's production value, I got to give him points for him having less production value. Even though I do think the black shirt makes it look like it's just like a floating head around his thing, but that gives it even more credibility because it makes it even more. It makes it less dress rehearsed. And to the points that he was making, let's be honest with it. The N-word has become this. I want to say reverse racial privilege. And what I mean by that is that we live in a world where, in the United States, where we talk about the privileged race. And generally we say that's white people, and specifically white men, to be honest with you. White men are the privileged race. So to combat that, it seems like the N-word has been used in a way where if you happen to be not black, you don't have the right or the license socially to use that word. And if you don't have the right to use that word, then there's a social consequence if you do. And that, I think, is wrong because essentially what we're doing is just discriminating based on race. If a black person and a white person says the same exact sentence, the only thing that makes it different about the way people view it is the race of the person saying it, not the motive, not the intent, not the context. It's essentially just them saying it. And as a free speech advocate, I don't accept that. I don't accept that there's no context in which someone of another race can say the N-word. I reject the concept of special words for special races. I reject all that. But what I do understand is that the word has a condemnation and it makes people feel bad. And I think in polite society, I also believe in business and professional environments, that's something you won't use and you shouldn't use because there should be a penalty for that. But it shouldn't be limited to the color of this. It should be limited by the environment that you're in at the time. So Joe Rogan saying it, and when he said these words, and the things that he was saying when he said them weren't meant to demean a race, weren't meant to use it to say this person is a dumb person and this is why I'm calling them that. In the context of what he was saying, and when you go back and look at context, it was in the flow of a conversation, meaning a particular point where other black people were agreeing with them. So, you know, just if you're telling me looking at this and looking at his apology, I actually have absolutely no issue with Joe Rogan using the word in the past. Matter of fact, I don't have an issue with if he uses the word in the future, as long as he's using it consistently and he's not using it in this in a way that's obviously meaning to demean someone. And I believe the C word too.
I was going to bring up. I was going to bring up the C word as the closest
exactly
parallel.
I think it's exactly the same thing. I believe, but it's interesting because when black people use the C word, it's okay against white people, and I happen not to believe it's okay.
Now, okay, which C word are we talking about? See you next Tuesday, or
We're talking about I like to eat crackers.
Oh, okay,
Or like Cracker Barrel.
I was actually thinking the closest parallel I could think of was the four-letter C word.
Oh,
in England and Australia is just a term to say you jerks, folks, whatever. It's almost like a meaningless word, but here in the United States has a very heavy stigma.
But it's not a racial slur, though. That's what I'm talking about.
No, that would be a sexist slur. That would be a sexist slur. And here's my thoughts on the Rogan thing, and I will display my hypocrisy in full here. Mm-hmm. I absolutely don't think you did anything wrong. I think that if the name of the album is the blah, 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 and you say the blah, 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 then you are stating out the name that was intended it to be identified, right? Mm-hmm. I think back, Adam Carolla was doing a documentary on the first black race car driver who went through all kinds of hell because of race. And this person wanted the movie's title to be Uppity Inward. That's what he wanted, and not inward. He wanted the word, okay?
Yeah.
And it wound up just being called uppity because there's a very significant connotation of uppity. That's another word that you throw in there.
Yeah.
So while I'm saying that I think he's right, I don't think he should be pinged on, all of that, here's my hypocrisy. There's no effing way you're going to hear me say the N-word. I will bend over backwards, sideways, and inside out just so I don't get painted with that brush you were describing earlier. So while I say that, you know what, Joe Rogan has every right, I'll sit there going, I'm not doing it.
Well, just I'm not doing it. But just because you believe somebody has the right to say something doesn't mean that you're going to say it. because you're right though. It's funny, I've said it a whole bunch of times, but now, to be honest with you, me and the wife were talking about it, and I was saying it to a couple of friends, and she was like, "Why are you using the word?" And I was like, "You know what? I don't know why I'm using this word, but now I feel like I'm like you. I don't believe I would use that word in fast company. As a matter of fact, I wouldn't. I honestly don't believe I should even be using the word at all because but again, I feel like Scalia when he said the only way to stop discriminating based on race is to stop discriminating based on race. And I think this is one of those things where we've kind of accepted this inherent racism because we believe it's kind of justified because of past actions.
Or I was quoting a Lenny Bruce bit, or I was quoting a Paul Mooney bit, or I was talking about how Quentin Tarantino used it repeatedly in Pulp Fiction.
I was always wondering, how come Quentin Tarantino has such a great pass on something like this, right? Because Quentin Tarantino says it in every movie.
Or Eminem.
He never gets a problem. He never has issues. And like how come he has this? I would call it a black pass. A black pass.
Does he? I know me.
He does. He does. I can. We could do Quentin Tarantino saying the N-word for an hour, right? He says it all the time, but it seems like he has a pass to say it. But what gets you that pass? What gets you that card where, like, essentially, I don't see why Quentin Tarantino can say it and Joe Rogan can't say it, right? It just doesn't make sense to me.
I have a theory on that, and maybe I'm wrong.
Go ahead.
He's getting the Eminem pass. And what I mean by this is that I'm not a big Eminem fan per se, and I'm not saying that Quentin Tarantino grew up on was it 7 Mile, 8 Mile, whatever it is, some miles, which are a very
8 Mile, yeah.
8 Mile ethnic community. So I mean, he grew up with blacks, and that I think gives a pass to a degree too. But I think Eminem's ultimate pass is that by most considerations, he's in the top 5 to top 10 rappers in the world, hands down.
Well,
He's like the Tiger King of rap in versus the Gulf, or was at one point.
I'll tell you why. What Eminem has a pass because he suffered in the hood with black people as a black person. Like when you watch his history, it wasn't him with white people and all this. He lived in the hood. He suffered. All his best friends were black. He just happened to be a white guy that grew up in a black neighborhood. So he was using that word because that's what everyone else in that neighborhood was using. Because it's kind of that he suffered with us. He suffered as a black person. So I think sometimes when the black community looks at Eminem, they don't see a white guy, right? Even though he is white, they
he's
see
the
a
opposite
rapper.
of Drake. He's the opposite of Drake.
Yes. They see a guy who happens to be white, but it's just like one of us. Like you're saying, if he says the N-word, nobody's even going to bat an eye. But if you take somebody who looks just like Eminem, but is not Eminem, and he says it, you got a problem.
Well, where I'm going with this, though, is Eminem's talent also reinforces that to where he's such a respected rapper. Now, this is where I'm getting into Tarantino. I could be wrong, but maybe Tarantino's writing is so authentic to the spirit and the feeling of the community that it's accepted. Like the way he's representing it with Samuel L. Jackson and Pulp Fiction and things is so well done, taken to such a level that much like the mafia adopted the Godfather and actually started to emulate the Godfather, is it possible that Tarantino's writing and presentation is in such a manner that the black community not only gives a pass, but kind of embraces it a little bit?
Tarantino tells the black story very accurately in Jackie Brown and all of his movies. It's when you watch his movies, the black characters seem naturally in that environment with the N-word and all that type of stuff, even when he says it. And I also think Eminem, where he's captured the black experience and is giving it to you just through his eyes, but his eyes aren't from a white perspective. It's actually the black perspective also. Because they both blew up in these black neighborhoods. So they're giving you the black perspective, but they just happen to be white people doing it. So I think you're right. I think that's what gives them the pass.
And honestly, I think the whole thing gets pretty silly.
Or I was talking about how a Netflix executive, ironically, used it because he was trying to compare it to another offensive word, and he said it out loud, and they fired him. Not calling anybody or just saying the word out loud. I was also talking about how there's not another word like it in the entire English language, because it's a word where only one group of people is allowed to use it, and they can use it in so many different ways. Like if a white person says that word, it's racist and toxic, but a black person can use it and it could be a punchline. It could be a term of endearment. It could be lyrics to a rap song. It could be a positive affirmation. It's a very unusual word, but it's not my word to use. I'm well aware of that now, but for years I used it in that manner. I never used it to be racist because I'm not racist, but whenever you're in a situation where you have to say, I'm not racist, you fucked up.
Whenever he's doing a hostage video, I'm not a racist.
Come on, is this not a full-throated up? I mean, he is not pulling punches. He's very
This is so different than the Will Smith apology video. This is so different, but this is good. This is good. But he's right though. There's nothing this man has said that is wrong. There's nothing, because he's right. What other word is? But again, I think the history of racism in this country, and I think people understanding that gives if it's interesting because I'm kind of two minds about this. On one side, if the only advantage that black people have is using this one word, N word. Then what's the big deal? Okay, let them use it, right? So what?
Mhm.
Who cares? The issue that he's running up against is that, like, when he said, the only part that I disagree with is that when he said,
But it's not my word to use.
because essentially, if you break down what he's saying that word is not my word, not because of the context, not because of any motive. It's not my word because I'm white. And
Mhm.
I think that's the issue that I disagree with. I don't think there should be words specifically for black people. And I believe if that's the case, then that's the racism that we need to fight.
I totally agree with you, Nate, 100%. And I will tell you this, and I commit to it. There's no effing way I'm going to say that word. Are you crazy?
And I clearly have fucked up. And that's my intention to express myself in this video, to say there's nothing I can do to take that back. I wish I could. Obviously, that's not possible. I do hope that, if anything, that this can be a teachable moment. Because I never thought it would ever be taken out of context and put in a video like that. And now that it is, holy shit, it looks bad. And it's part of also me doing this podcast for thousands of hours, thousands of episodes, over 12 years. I said a lot of fucking stupid shit, which is fine when you're talking about most things.
Almost perfect apology. I mean, he, again, is absolutely sincere. Can you find any glitch or problem or anything? I mean, he's so full throat. It's like, I'm a dumbass. And I think this is part of why people need to understand this is what makes Joe Rogan so popular.
Yes. Yes.
I absolutely believe that Joe is talking to me. It feels like he's talking personally to me. Personally, it's not even a wide audience. He's not group talking. It's very intimate. Like, dude, I effed up, man. I effed up. Just like I'm talking to you right now, Nate, talking to everybody else. He is so personable, so believable and open, and there's an actual humility to Rogan I don't think everyone has.
And there's another clip that I have to address. There's a clip from 11 years ago. I was telling a story on the podcast about how me and my friend Tommy and his girlfriend, we got really high. We were in Philadelphia, and we went to go see Planet of the Apes. And we didn't know where we were going. We just got dropped off by a cab, and we got dropped off in this all-black neighborhood. And I was trying to make the story entertaining, and I said we got out, and it was like we were in Africa. It's like we were in Planet of the Apes. I did not, nor would I ever say that black people are apes, but it sure fucking sounded like that. And I immediately afterwards said, that's a racist thing to say. Planet of the Apes wasn't even in Africa. I was just saying there's a lot of black people there. But then I went on to talk about what a positive experience it was and how much fun it was to go to see this movie in a black neighborhood. It sounded terrible. And like I said, you can have clunky stories about anything, but not about race. And so I deleted that whole podcast, but obviously somebody made a clip out of it and taken out of context. It looks terrible, but it looks terrible even in context. It's a fucking idiotic thing to say. And I was just trying to be entertaining. I certainly wasn't trying to be racist. And I certainly would never want to offend someone for entertainment with something as stupid as racism. My hope is that, look, I can't go back in time and change what I've said. I wish I could. Obviously, that's not possible. But I do hope that this can be a teachable moment for anybody that doesn't realize how offensive that word can be coming out of a white person's mouth, in context or out of context. My sincere and humble apologies. I wish there was more that I could say, but all of this is just me talking from the bottom of my heart. It makes me sick watching that video, but hopefully at least some of you will accept this and understand where I'm coming from. My apologies and much love. My sincere, deepest apologies and much love.
give that man an Oscar. Give that man an Oscar. I feel that was a sincere apology. I follow what he's saying, and there's no, I don't believe there's any way that this gentleman's a racist. But it's unfortunately it's never what we think. It's actually what you guys think, right? Eric, is Joe
Yes.
Rogan a racist?
No. I mean, no, I don't think so. By the way, right after he did this apology, one of his black friends from MMA came out and like looked over and said,
So that's my nigga Joe Rogan.
I honestly feel, and Nate, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that there are professional, the people who are professionally offended.
Of
As
course,
in,
yeah.
Nate, I know that you can't help yourself. Your friends can't help yourself. So I have a whole bunch of white people who get offended for you. In case you missed something, Nate, congratulations. There are many of us out there, and that we're looking, because Nate, you may not know it. Okay. You may not know that somebody's saying something bad about you. So we're going to interpret things for you so you know when to be offended. And I hope you appreciate the service of us professionally offended people.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter what I think. Obviously, I'm very sarcastic. What do you think? Please tell us below, and we'll see you next time.